as I was reading newspapers and magazines and others, I was thinking about this Obamacare law, which is affecting my family and your families, and it's going to affect everybody, whether you're a doctor or nurse or administrator, whether you're a patient or just somebody who wants coverage. This law is and has been nefarious from day one. This law, I was reading an article, USA Today, Venezuelan military seizes major retail chain. And it talks about how this slob, this pig, this illegitimate president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, ordered the military to occupy 5 stores owned by an electronics company known as DACA, D-A-K-A, because he concluded it wasn't charging fair prices to customers. And I thought to myself, what's happened in this country is actually worse in a way. No, the military hasn't seized our healthcare system, but the politicians and the bureaucracy has seized our healthcare system, and against our will. And I was thinking about John McCain during the Ted Cruz 21-hour speech on the Senate floor and others, saying, well, look, the people voted for this, the people never voted for this. Never ever voted for this. They were lied to through and through, and Congress took steps under Democrat control, violating their own procedures and other steps to get this thing passed before the American people could address it. The president signs it, it goes to the Supreme Court, and one of the most outrageous, illegitimate decisions in the history of the court is issued. The people never asked for this. The people never voted for this. The people weren't even asked about it. All of this was done to deceive and to distort and to destroy. Now, this law, let's get down to brass tacks here. This law will make it more difficult for sick people to survive. It's going to make it more difficult for sick people not just to get health care coverage. The point of health care coverage is to get medical treatment. And it's going to make it much more difficult with the massive deductibles, the massive policies, which are intended to bankrupt you. They're intended to make it more difficult. What they're trying to do is steer you like sheep, like cattle, in a direction to pen you up into these policies that only the government's going to approve. That's why so many of you are panicking. You have anxiety. We can't find alternatives because they've shut them down. As if the military seized our healthcare system. These people have changed our world. These people have changed our lifestyle. They have used the law, the political system, and the government in the most diabolical way. A complete perversion and abuse of all three. And make no mistake, they are endangering your health. They are endangering the lives of hundreds of millions of people in this country. They are destroying livelihoods. They are destroying lifestyles of millions and millions of people in this country. And why? It's entirely an abstraction. It's entirely ideological. They not only don't respect individuals using their free will to make decisions, they despise individuals using their free will making decisions. And so they've created a kind of convulsion in this nation now. The nation's bleeding from this. They've taken the greatest medical system known to man precisely because it's dispersed. Precisely because there are companies and individuals and nonprofits and you name it out there working, motivated, making profit, or maybe not. trying to press the advantage, trying to push the edge of the envelope, trying to learn, trying to invent. And they're pouring it all through Washington, the least innovative, the least productive, the least service-oriented entity on the face of the earth. We can't get through the computer. The computer. What's going to happen to cutting-edge medicines and technologies? What's going to happen to those people who have diseases or illnesses or what have you that are very rare and therefore treatment is extraordinarily expensive? What's going to happen to really old people, not just senior citizens, but really old people, where they're going to say, look, we just don't have the money for this anymore? What then? What if there aren't enough doctors in a particular geographic area? What if there aren't enough doctors serving Medicare or Medicaid patients? What then? What then is the iron-fisted tyranny gets bigger and bigger and more abusive and more abusive. And no, they don't need the military or the police to take over hospitals and all the rest. No. It's worse. They're using the law to destroy the law. They're using the law to promote tyranny, to destroy our institutions. And make no mistake about it, that's exactly what they're doing. Through massive social experiments. They are social experiments. They are experimenting every day, 1,000 times a way, and you are the guinea pigs. You're the lab rats. It's you. It's you. So what Obama and Reid and Pelosi and John Roberts and the other four have achieved, not a Venezuelan military-style takeover, but a takeover nonetheless. Even worse, because they've used the free institutions that our veterans fought for, the free institutions that our framers gave to us, to destroy us, or to destroy so much that matters to us. This is very, very serious, folks. Now, I want to remind you of a couple of things. They say it's the law. The very people who are using the law to destroy the law, the very corrupt, dishonest people who have used the law in a lawless fashion are now lecturing you and me, this is the law, and therefore we have no options. So just live with it, or die with it, or be sick with it. The audacity, the arrogance. Lest we forget, the United States Senate, under Harry Reid, with 60 Democrats, which they hadn't seen in a long time, and all of them, ladies and gentlemen, you will recall, weren't elected. So all 60 were not elected, but they had their 60. Well, they wanted to act, and they wanted to act quickly. But before they could act, in 2010, something happened in Massachusetts. I want John McCain to hear me. The people of Massachusetts elect Scott Brown for one reason and one reason only, to stop Obamacare. He replaced Ted Kennedy, who died. They elected Scott Brown to stop Obamacare. Reid needed to get around that. What Reid did, he took another bill out of the Senate, not a tax bill, not a revenue-raising bill, because that has to come out of the House. Just how sleazy this man is. With a completely different topic and issue. Took all the language out of that bill and replaced it with the Obamacare language. They passed it. and sent it to the House. That vote in the Senate was 60 to 39. 60 to 39. They passed it as a budget bill in a budget process to avoid what? A filibuster. In any event, goes to the House. The House passes it without any changes. Not a single Republican voted for it. Virtually every single Democrat voted for it. It passed by 7 votes. 7 votes. The president quickly signed it. Then what happened? We got to go through this. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So this law is passed through the perversion and bastardization of the legislative process to avoid the people, to avoid the next election cycle, to avoid an election that took place in Massachusetts. The executive branch and Congress, controlled by the same party, conspiring with each other. They know they're in a hurry. They know they have to do this before the American people have an opportunity to actually stop them. And it works its way up to the Supreme Court. The first Attorney General to challenge is Ken Cuccinelli. Under attack in the last month by his own party. Said to be too extreme. Said to be this and that. Another governor said to be the future of the Republican Party in the country. A governor who refused to fight Obamacare. A governor who refused to sign a brief. A governor who right now in New Jersey is fully implementing Obamacare. Anyway, it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court upholds a law that Congress didn't even write. The 4 radical activists on the court and John Roberts rewrite the statute. Because it's unconstitutional. Because Congress does not have the power to force people into commerce, to do that which they choose not to do for themselves. And so what John Roberts did, in order to avoid that and cobble together a majority, he decided that the penalty provisions in the law were a tax. Even though the President of the United States insisted they weren't a tax, even though Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi insisted they weren't a tax, because after all, the President said he's not going to raise taxes on the middle class. This is a massive penalty. So he rewrote it. He just rewrote it. And in his dissent, or in the dissent, those justices who opposed what John Roberts had done, they said, to say that the individual mandate merely imposes a tax is not to interpret the statute, but to rewrite it. Judicial tax writing is particularly troubling. Taxes have never been popular, such as the Stamp Act of 1765, and in part for that reason, the Constitution requires tax increases to originate in the House of Representatives. So this law, with its massive quote-unquote taxes, originated in the Senate, and because it wasn't even a tax, the Supreme Court rewrote it. That is to say, they must originate in the legislative body most accountable to the people, where legislators must weigh the need for the tax against the terrible price they may pay at their next election, which is never more than 2 years off. Federalist number 58 defended the decision to give the original power to the House on the ground that the chamber that is more accountable to the people should have the primary role in raising revenue. And the dissenters said, we have no doubt that Congress knew precisely what it was doing when it rejected an earlier version of this legislation that imposed a tax instead of a requirement with a penalty. Imposing a tax through judicial legislation inverts the constitutional scheme and places the power to tax in the branch of government least accountable to the citizenry. And the government's opening brief, the dissenter said, did not even address the question. Perhaps because until today, no federal court has accepted the implausible argument that that section of the law is an exercise of taxing power. But it's the law, ladies and gentlemen. It's the law. It's not the law. It was never the law. It was never constitutional. Why am I getting into this? Because we have a short memory in this country. All of a sudden we have this devastating, destructive monstrosity of a law, and people keep saying, even Republicans, it's the law, it's the law. Damn it, it's not the law. It's an unconstitutional, unauthorized breach of authority that's being imposed on us, just like the Venezuelan people when the military step in and take over businesses. I'm not done.
Some people talk about the Tea Party. We are the Tea Party. Call in now. 877-381-3811.
So what is this? This is tyranny. That's what it is. It's exactly what it is. There's no other word for this. And when you unmoor yourself from the rule of law, and when we're talking about the Constitution, it's actually more than the rule of law. When you destroy the social compact between the citizen and the sovereign, when you undermine the civil community, when the government is perpetuating fraud after fraud, deceit after deceit, and wrapping it in the law, it's tyranny. When a president of the United States goes before the people, pre-campaign, during campaign, after the campaign, and lies through his teeth time and time and time again to try and conceal as best as he can what he's doing to them. When Congress conducts itself in such a way as to deceive the American people at every turn through one procedure after another, under the cover of darkness, behind closed doors, that's tyranny. When the Supreme Court of the United States participates in this, it destroys its own credibility, as it has again and again and again, with respect to the rule of law. This has nothing to do with the law. This isn't law. It's the opposite of law. Now look what's going on in the nation. Look what they've done to us. Look what they've done to you. I don't know how many hours you're staying up at night, worried about whether you're going to have the health care you had 1 month before, which you were perfectly happy with or happy enough. Some of you have important medical appointments and medical treatments you're going through, and you're wondering how that's going to be handled. Your idiot senator has no idea. Your idiot member of Congress has no idea. The idiot 5 on the Supreme Court, they don't know. The idiot president doesn't know either. No, they just lit a match, threw it into the into the fuel, and now we have a flame. Meanwhile, politics all the way through, cronyism all the way through, waivers for favored groups and citizens, delays for favored groups and citizens, deals and subsidies and cronyism. The worst of the worst. This is animalistic behavior. This is balkanization. This is the crumbling of the social compact, or the civil society, if you will. Largely the same thing. It's a disgrace. This is why the Constitution matters. This is why virtue matters. This is why morality and integrity in public office matters. All I keep hearing is who can win, who can get the Hispanics and the blacks and the gays and the straights and the old and the white. That's not it. That's not serious. You wonder how republics collapse? You're watching one right before your eyes. Right before your eyes. Look at this. And then we're told this is not only the law, it's compassionate. I mean, after all, the insurance companies suck, and your health care sucks, and, aren't you sick of paying for everything? I mean, this is how it works. Destroy these institutions, trash these institutions, and hold yourself up as the savior. Now, folks, let's put the surroundings of office and all the efforts to persuade us that this man in the Oval Office is presidential, and let's take a closer look. This guy's not presidential, he's superficial. This guy's not smart, he's an ideologue. That's why he doesn't learn from his mistakes, because he doesn't believe he makes mistakes. He believes you make mistakes. The problem isn't him, it's you. The problem isn't him, it's our institutions. We have to go further, and we have to go faster. So now what is he prepared to do? Rule by executive order. Oh, well, that's perfectly good. He's been doing that anyway. You see, once you get the taste for tyranny, it's pretty tough to get rid of it when you're the guy running it. Now we're going to rule by executive order. We got a whole bunch of them lined up, you see. From the environment to race to housing. Man, I have ordered my administration, get those executive orders ready, baby, because I'm going to issue them one after another, after another, after another. And who's going to stop me? I've got the Supreme Court in my back pocket. Those chumps even upheld Obamacare. I've got Congress in my back pocket. Harry Reid will do whatever the hell I say. He's the perfect number 2 mobster. And, of course, the Senate Republicans, they're such cowards. All I have to say is, boo, I'll shut down the government, and they'll run for the hills. The Republicans. Jeez, don't get me started. These guys control the House of Representatives, and let me be clear, and enough Republicans in the Senate to filibuster anything they want to. If they stand together, you realize they can stop whatever they want to? But they don't want to. It's exactly why they attacked Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and a handful of others. They don't want to stand up to this because they're already counting. Well, we got to get Hispanics and same sex and this and that. They're already cobbling together their next tactic. Not to save the country, but to save their own asses. And what they don't understand is they're one and the same. But that for another day. Or maybe another hour. Maybe next hour. So look at what we have here. A disaster. You thought the DMV was bad? Well, at least the DMV isn't responsible for your health. And the big giveaway in all this, ladies and gentlemen, was when the ruling class in Washington appointed the most threatening, the scariest, and in some ways the most dangerous agency of them all to enforce this law, the Internal Revenue Service. What kind of government would put the Internal Revenue Service in charge of health care? A tyrannical one. an oppressive one that means business. That's what. That's the kind of government. Yes, I was thinking about this a lot on the airplane ride. When I got back to Virginia early this morning, thinking about this a lot, that we move on too fast without taking a step back and analyzing what's just happened. This has happened in the last 3.5 years, folks. That's fast. This fundamental transformation was at breakneck speed. And only a handful of men and women have been willing to stand up to this. What's their end game, they say? Liberty is their end game. Well, they don't have the votes. They don't have the process. Excuse me. They were talking to the American people. They were talking to us, and you were trying to shut them down, Mitch McConnell and Orrin Hatch and John McCain. You were trying to quiet these men and women. You were trying to silence them when they were trying to merely go to the Senate floor and make the case for liberty and constitutionalism against this tyrannical outrage. And you were chopping at them and undermining them and stabbing them in the back. What's their end game? What's their end game? Liberty, you dummies. That's their end game. Win, lose, or draw. What's your end game? They have no end game. No end game whatsoever. Mitch McConnell desperately trying to hold on to power. What the hell for? I'm serious. Why? Is there nobody better in the Republican caucus, more energetic, a fresh face, who can communicate with the American people, who can make a principled case to the American people? Surely there is, because if not, the Republicans are doomed. They're doomed. What are the great 5 things Mitch McConnell has done in the Senate? Not to pick on him. I could pick on 25 of them. Answer? Well, he stood up on the First Amendment against whom? McCain. Well, a lot of people did. McCain-Feingold, remember? And how did that work out? Oh, Bush signed it. The Republicans. Well, here's the deal. I don't know if I should go here. I'm going to go here. My mother today had emergency surgery for a pacemaker. My son is doing better, but he's been very ill. And I look at these people, these hospitals that I visit, talk to these people. Their lives are being turned upside down. They're caregivers. The vast majority of them are trying to do the right thing, and they're doing the right thing. And I'm sick and tired of politicians and theoreticians and ideologues and bureaucrats making it so much harder. Making it so much harder to make people well. And it's not even just health care. They're shutting down businesses for no reason other than they think we should go into wind and solar, and they don't like natural gas. So these businesses that have been built up over 100 years with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees going out of business, laying people off. What the hell for? Driving people out of business. People starting to wonder what the hell's happening to their country. Then they're being told they don't pay enough taxes. Then they're being told that they can't have the health care that they want. Then they're being told that people who've come here illegally from other countries that haven't even put a stake in the ground yet have rights that they don't. What is going on? what's going on is we're in a post-constitutional period. And everything's up for grabs. Everything's up for grabs. The radical left is plowing ahead. The Republicans don't know what to do, so they're attacking us. Lots more to say. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So, you know what we want? We want a fighter. We want a fighter who's principled. We want a fighter who's going to fight in a way that's going to help save this nation. I see this Chris Christie's on every damn show. Not all, but most of the chatter is about elections, superficial stuff, and he's got his comebacks and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, this Obamacare law is the greatest threat to this republic in modern times. Put health care aside, for the reasons I said in the first half hour. The bastardization of our congressional representative process was outrageous. What those 5 justices did was unconscionable. It wasn't just an attack on your private health care, which is a private contract, which is a private property right that you've earned directly or indirectly. It wasn't just that. It was much more. It was much more. It was an attack on individual free will, which goes to the heart and soul of our nation, which is the heart and soul of Western civilization, which is the heart and soul of the Judeo-Christian thinking, the ability of an individual to reform him or herself.